Peace. Greetings to you all. It's your brother Naheem, a.k.a. Lord Abba, b.k.a. Mr. Just the Facts. I'm having some microphone issues right now, so I got to speak directly into the mic. I don't know what's going on with my microphone, so y'all let me know if it is too low for y'all to hear. But I'm going to try to get through this. Hit the like button, family. Share. We about to have a powerful discussion tonight. We got brother Reggie from Boston in the building tonight, joining the Be the Power team so we could talk ADOS politics. And we decided to scrap our show that we was gonna do on the other Reggie from Harlem. Let me be easy. I was about to go there for a minute, but brother Reggie from Harlem is and his Black City plan and how inapplicable that plan is for any redemption or salvation or reparations for our people. And we were going to really dissect that thing, get into his background because he keeps touting this Black City plan. And we noticed that it had a lot of similar language with NARC and in Cobra's platform as well. And even some similar language that we found in Ice Cube's contract for Black America. So we were going to really get into that thing tonight. But we thought that this would be a better discussion. And I want to give a shout out to Brother Reggie. I'm expecting the other bros to come on in the building. And when I say Brother Reggie, I'm talking about the Brother Reggie that's in front of us. I've heard this brother go in on several of occasions. I've heard him call into Sister Yvette Carnell's platform. And like whenever he calls in, he just shuts it down. So I just want to give honors to the brother for being here right now. Introduce yourself, brother.
Reggie from Boston. I just really appreciate y'all having me on your platform. It just such a short amount of time, y'all have made a real big impact in this space. So I really respect the work that y'all are doing. On here, I'm ready to get it in.
Definitely. My brother Josh is in the building. Did you want to say anything, brother Josh, before I opened it up?
Hey, no, I just wanted to say it's an honor to have you on, Reggie. I just was saying to the brothers earlier, every time when I hear you come on to a program, man, you just shut it down. You come in and you give your take. It's so insightful. The language you use is concise and it's powerful, and you really know what you're talking about, brother. So I happy to have you on the program today.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, so is my mic coming in clear enough for y'all to hear me?
Just a little bit. I can hear you.
Okay, everybody in the chat, if my audio is good enough, can you please type 1 in the comment section for me? I know we're on a delay, so I want to get into. We're gonna have a broad discussion tonight. So, Sister Yvette Carnell's last broadcast, it really hit home for me because I brought this book right here, and it's called Our Kind of People by Louis Otis Graham, and it's one of the people that she had highlighted in her last episode. And so what I want to do is I want to open up our discussion with a couple of excerpts from out of this book. Yeah, some people saying it's good, but the mic is low. I have no idea how to fix this thing, to be honest with you. I'll try to tweak it as we go along. I don't know if people saying it's kind of low. So I'm just gonna try to talk directly into the mic. So bear with me, people. So he starts off chapter 1 with this. Bryant Gumbel is, but Bill Cosby isn't. Lena Horne is, but Whitney Houston isn't. Andrew Young is, but Jesse Jackson isn't. And neither is Maya Angelou, Alice Walker, Clarence Thomas or Quincy Jones. And even though both of them try extremely hard, neither Diana Ross nor Robin Givens will ever be. And what he's talking about is our kind of people, this boule class that are what we call gatekeepers to the Black community. They literally become the buffers between the levers of power in white America, white political America, and our people. They help drive the emotional responses to a candidate like a Kamala Harris. Like I've seen several entertainers come out, Tavis Smiley being one of them, Clyburn in South Carolina, basically saying, so what, she locked up a lot of Black folk in San Francisco. Prosecutors have to be tough. Like, really? So I want to get into just a few excerpts, nothing long, but I want to frame the fact that we have enemies in high places as we move into this discussion. And Sister Yvette Carnell's last broadcast really helped give me a little bit more clarity of the type of gatekeepers that we face, right? So let me see. No, I'm going to start from here. Hold on. Let's start from here. He says, unlike my brother, I already knew that there was us and there was them. There were those children who belonged to Jack and Jill and summered in Sag Harbor, Highland Beach, or Oak Bluffs, Martha's Vineyard. I know somebody just brought a mansion out in Martha's Vineyard, right? Not too long ago. Welcome, my brother Ali Bey to the stream. Oh, let me see.
Peace.
Where was I?
What's good, y'all?
What up, Ali?
What's good?
All right, he continues. And there were those who didn't. Could you mute out real quick? All right, thanks, brother. It says, there were those who graduated from Spelman or Fisk and joined AKA, the Deltas, the Links, and the Girlfriends. And there were those who didn't. There were those fathers who were dentists, lawyers, and physicians from Howard or Meharry, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and who were alphas, kappas, or omegas, and members of the Comus or Boule, or the Guardsmen, fitting name. And there were those who weren't. There were those who could look back 2 or 3 generations and point to relatives who owned insurance companies, newspapers, funeral homes, local banks, trucking companies, restaurants, catering firms, or farmland, and there were those who couldn't. So when you hear ADOS speaking about boomers and those who are boomer hooked and locked into a boomer class, this book gives us a clue on who these boomers were and what they descend from. I'm going to scroll down to this next excerpt. He says, it was a color thing and a class thing. And for generations of Black people, color and class have been inexorably tied together. Since I was born and raised around people with the focus on many of these characteristics, it should be no surprise that I was later to decide at age 26 to have my nose surgically altered just so that I could further buy into the aesthetic biases that many other Black elite hold too dear. Another excerpt. He says, but whether it was mainly the skin tone or hair texture, the family background, the education, the money, or the sharpness of our features that set some of us apart and made some of us think we were superior to other Blacks and to most whites, we were certain that we would always be able to recognize our kind of people. One more excerpt. It says, although it was illegal to educate slaves, explains history professor Dr. Adele Logan Alexander of George Washington University, it was far more likely that the house slave would learn to read, be introduced to upper class white traditions, be permitted to play or interact with white family members than would a field slave. In fact, slave owning families found they could run their homes more efficiently when their house slaves were more knowledgeable and educated. Not surprisingly, both whites and house niggers came to consider the dark-skinned field niggas to be less civilized and intellectually inferior. So I want to stop there, and I want my guests to come on, but I want to bring up two quick images. And I know my mic quality is poor, so people bear with me. Hopefully I'll have that fixed by the...
You're good now.
Oh,
He's coming in strong and clear now.
okay, I guess I could stop yelling then. So I want to share my screen real quick. This is from a sister who's down with Roland Martin's clip. Her name is Avis Jones the Weaver.
Uh-oh.
We've had several debates on Facebook, and she eventually blocked me because her arguments always centered around appealing to pathos, for those of you who study logical fallacies, etc., trying to appeal to people's emotions, but never on the facts. The facts were always put in her face, and she eventually would block me. And so I would get these screenshots sent to us from our brothers and our particular group. And this was in response to a sister speaking about the low wealth positionality of our people in the United States of America. And the sister puts, the low wealth is what puts the number this high. I should have screenshotted the initial post as well. But what she said, I mean, it speaks for itself. She says the vast majority of Black people are not poor. You see?
Yeah, it was actually in response to a tweet that William Barber tweeted about the low wealth of Black Americans in particular. And so she was trying to undermine what he was saying with her particular response there. But right. Yeah, the original tweet came from William Barber.
All right, I want to pull one more thing up real quick. Now, this is from Darrell Scott. He's a professor at Howard, a supreme ADOS hater, right? We're not used to using the term supreme in such a sense, but this guy is just the ADOS hater. So he does this post. Conservatives don't believe anything they are saying about Kamala Harris and race. Harris and race, nothing. Whites, including most liberals, still believe anyone with an African ancestor is Black. These folks are simply borrowing from ADOS to sow dissent among African Americans. To whites, biracial is Black with a recognition of recent quote unquote admixture. And if you look down at the bottom, we see her again, Avis Jones the Weaver, saying the right is funding ADOS. They are in cahoots. Now, there's a such thing called false light and slander. I'm just saying. I'm just throwing that out there because I think that it's slanderous to say that ADOS is in cahoots with a political party that doesn't want us to receive reparations at all, and we're pushing for reparations. So what we're looking at is the gatekeepers, the boule. We are looking at the people that Yvette Carnell was talking about on our last show, our kind of people type, the Angela Rye, who said not all Black people are poor. I have wealthy friends. My friends are well off. I don't know if she used the word wealthy. My friends are well off. And we relate that, we correlate that with what Avis Jones the Weaver said. And we get an understanding that so long as these people have their position solidified in front of us as buffers to the levers of power, it's going to be hard for us to move And this is why I believe that this ADOS movement, its messaging is not only right on time, but that is vitally important. So I want to open it up to Brother Reggie first, and then I want to have, my bros Ali and Josh come in afterwards. And you could go in, Brother Reggie, on that, or you could go in on anything that you want to speak to, brother.
I think it's just interesting how a lot of our detractors have come full circle and just kind of bring up the same slanders that were brought up when Kamala first ran. You'll hear the not so much as it was then, but the little Russian smear is thrown around, the right wing smear is thrown around, and they try to say that the right is picking up ADOS points and weaponizing them against the Democrats. Well, the fact that you didn't get your stuff together and come up with a black agenda, that's not my problem that your political opponent is now weaponizing that in the marketplace of ideas. You should have gave me a black agenda and they would have nothing to work with. But they see how they take our votes for granted, how they push us to the side, so they just simply exploit that. Like any base level political scientist could see that lane, that they're just passing the buck instead of getting serious with black folks.
Definitely.
Yeah, indeed. I agree 100%. And to the point of the black agenda, all they had to do is adopt the one that was laid out on ADOS101.com. Right? It's not even rocket science. This is something that was already done, and they knew it exists. All of these politicians know what's on that website, right? So they could have adopted that into their plans and their platforms as they're running for president, vice president, whatever the case is. But none of them choose to do it. I mean, they choose not to do that. They choose not to do it. So it's not even like they had to do a lot of work to figure out what needs to be done. This stuff was already laid out for them. You know what I'm saying? It's already laid out for them.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. Well, we can't do that. We can't come out with a black agenda that's speaking that type of language, because then we're gonna turn off our white voting base. We're gonna make it to where that's gonna make Trump just have an easy way to rile up his racist base so he can get another 4 years. So what would y'all say to that?
I would say that the white base has been Republican for a long time. I think Tone said it best, like, if you keep running around chasing the ghost of white voters that were never there, you're gonna lose black ones. Like, I don't understand why you just come with the black agenda. And this was even a discussion, that I had with my mother. She doesn't necessarily agree with the hard line that ADOS takes, but where we do agree is that the Democrats have not done the work to create the political infrastructure in places throughout the South and where black people live, but especially in the South, in the way that when they got Doug Jones in there, the Democrats started scrambling and trying to get a ground game, get people on the ground, but it wasn't something that was consistent, sustained, or widespread throughout black areas. Like, the Democrats just don't want to put in the work. Like, the populations are there in a lot of these red states and red counties, to where, like, if you put in the work, if you continue to fight to restore voting rights and such, and just having people on the ground there to shine the light, when the Republicans do backward stuff, some of these red districts or maybe even states, depending on state, could flip blue. But the Democrats aren't serious, because that takes a lot in terms of personnel, funding, outreach, and actually getting specific about the issues that affect people, in those areas. So, I don't want to hear it. It's like you got a base here, and it's just like it was in the '60s, when Malcolm was talking the ballot and the bullet. I still believe that black people, if we consolidate and leverage our vote effectively, that it can constitute a swing vote. Because you see the numbers, Hispanics are running off. They white now, so they're splitting in the same way that white folks are. Asians are running off. We're still the swing vote, but if we keep playing, and as other people come in and are made white or come in and are honorary rights in terms of immigration, is going to be over soon.
Indeed, I want to speak to that real quick. I want to say
you sound real low, bro.
Oh man, it's back on the low thing. Do I still sound low? All right, go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead,
it's still
Y'all-
low.
It's better now. Yeah, well,
Yeah,
go ahead, Ali. Go ahead.
Yeah. Now, I was just going to ask him to
So,
say what he
wait,
was
can y'all hear me?
getting ready to say, but you could go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah,
what's
I can hear
going on with this thing? Maybe that's a sign I need to finally get the box I've been talking about getting for the past couple of weeks, so we can start taking the phone calls, and I just haven't pulled the trigger on it yet. But it reminds me of when Bernie Sanders didn't put the proper investments into our communities across the United States of America. And I said that. I was going to write about it. I don't know. I just didn't get around to doing it. But we watched as the Progressive Party thought that they could rely on the coalition of Asian and Latino and all of these other voters. But what happened is when Joe Biden got to South Carolina, it was ADOS that propelled him and put him into the position that he's in now. So what I don't understand, however, is how the DNC took the same gamble from 2016 and how we as a people fell for the same rules that they was trying in 2016 when they pushed with Biden again. And it's one of the things that's stressed by ADOS is that white America gave us Trump. We didn't vote for Trump. We didn't vote for that guy. So that lack of investment is what we're seeing all across the board, and the Democratic platform, the DNC's platform, Joe Biden's platform. There's no day one issue for us. On day one, I'm going to do DACA. I'm going to do gun reform. On day one, we're going to make sure immigrants, we're going to make sure there's no on day one, we're going to pass sweeping, let's just say, federal reforms that govern how police officers deal with blacks, and then y'all could use the other terms, people of color, et cetera, et cetera. But we are the ones who are being indiscriminately gunned down by racist cops. There's never a day one agenda for our people at all. And it seems like we keep falling for the same rules over and over again. So what I love about what the ADOS movement is doing is it's throwing a monkey wrench into that whole thing, is messing up all of the cogs. So our kind of people type, the Lawrence Otis Graham types, which we see in the Roland Martins and all of the different entertainers that they're propping up with the Black Girl Magic, K-Hive, Kamala Harris push that didn't work the first time. We're seeing it happen again, and they know that they could get us on emotion, and that's what's going to drive this thing, so that they could find another way to not do nothing for us for another 4 to 8 years, but give us a whole bunch of promises.
Yeah. So another thing I hear with people, and I think that's how we're gonna do it. I'm just gonna throw out some stuff and that I hear people say all the time, and then we can build on that. So another thing I hear is, well, somebody told me this other day. Well, that's still, if we get Kamala Harris, if we get Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris, well, at least number one, that's better than Trump. But then if you look at Harris, she may not be, native Black or whatever. And we know that even though she's trying to put on like she is, but that's still progress as far as Black folks ascending. Maybe we had Obama. And then we had Kamala. Maybe one day we'll get an ADOS. What do y'all say to that type of to that statement right there?
I think, with the path that we're on, they're setting it up to where that would never happen, to where you just kind of do the Overton window thing. You just kind of slowly erase us, and then they'll look back and say, oh my gosh, what happened? There used to be ADOS here, but hey, we have these other black folks, and just move on with life, like nothing happened. So it's very subtle and insidious, just kind of the way that the United States has kind of brought other populations in to kind of add, to the class contradiction in terms of bringing the elites over to join with the boule here. And whether ADOS or not, it's like they're causing us the same problems. You'll have the ADOS chattering class siding with the Kamala Harrises and the Obamas of the world. It's just a mess.
What you think, Ali?
I agree with him. I think that we path towards immigrants being the dominant base for the Democratic Party. They are really trying to dismiss us, as far as I'm concerned. From what I can see, that's what's going on. And I'm going to say this. Just yesterday, I saw an article about the white nationalist Richard Spencer endorsing Biden for president. And he says the alt-right MAGA movement or moment is over. But the Democratic nominee's campaign swiftly says his support is 10,000% unwelcome. So Joe Biden claims he doesn't want his endorsement. But what's interesting about Richard Spencer endorsing Joe Biden is what I think is getting ready to happen. Is I think the white nationalists from the Republican Party are getting ready to move into the Democratic Party. That's what I think is getting ready to happen. What you think, Brother Reggie? What do you think about that? Have you seen that particular article?
Yeah, I saw the Richard Spencer thing, but for me, I feel like they're kind of already there. As far as it's not the blatant, tiki torches, you will not replace us kind of talk. But like if you go into any major metropolitan area that's under Democratic leadership, you'll find similar levels of segregation, whether north or south. Like here in Boston, for example, it's one of the most segregated cities in the country. And if you try to upend that order, they'll turn into Klansmen real quick. So Richard, whether we're talking Richard Spencer or a Bernie Sanders, if you push them too far, they're gonna snap on you, put you back in your place. So it's like it doesn't surprise me, because for all their ideological disagreements, they still want to be able to run the country, and in a lot of ways, Trump is dismantling a lot of those institutions in a lot of the ways that our government works effectively. But with that said, it doesn't create an impetus for me to want to get him out of there, because the stuff that he is trying to tear down, sans the post office, which has been under attack for a long time, a lot of these institutions and norms never worked for us anyway, to where if he's running rampant through the DOJ, corrupted at that institution. Well, Obama never put it to work for us. So it's like, I don't have a DOJ. Go ahead and tear it down. Like he dismantling the EPA. There's still lead in Flint. Black belt still messed up. You have environmental racism. ADOS people don't have an EPA. America has an EPA. I don't have an EPA. So if Trump wants to tear it down, I bet.
The other Americans don't have one.
Yeah, so a lot of these institutions that people are so afraid of being torn down is because it's now being torn down for them. They've never worked for us. So Trump, Biden, same thing.
Right.
Yeah, I wanted to say, like, on that, and going back further when we're talking about when I brought up the question about Kamala and Obama, I feel like the reason why they picked them, it wasn't so much that they had the ability to mask, or it wasn't totally that they had the ability to mask themselves in being native black or ADOSness or whatever, but it was also about the ability to be so many people and not necessarily one person, to be so many groups and I see that's a trend. It seems like however many groups that you look like you can represent, then we feel like though you'll welcome those in. But to undergird that, to make it real in America with this American history, you have to come in the door with the story, with the mannerisms, and with the language, with the sound of coming from that ADOS background. Because that's the only way it makes it like work with American politics. And I think the progressive and the Bernie Sanders type folks were like changing that a little bit to where like you could be anybody. I mean, you could be any group has the same standing as us. So I don't think I wasn't really a fan of that type of approach. And I see that that's a problem moving forward. Like you said, we're setting up to where you won't see an ADOS vice president or president, because the most advantageous person is a person that could look like they can be part of so many other groups. And one thing that I don't think I've heard anybody say, but I thought about it, and maybe I heard somebody say it, was like you can bring in and you can create more of other groups, but you can't bring in no more ADOS. You can't bring in no ADOS from nowhere else, because we're foundational and we're here. Like, so if you're able to bring in other groups, if you're able to create other groups, I don't care if it's LGBT, if you have to segment or whatever, and get us to not focus on our issues, which is the number one issue, which is you have to fix the damage that was done over here through centuries. And you do that via reparations, as far as at a baseline closing the racial wealth gap. If you focus on doing that, if you bring in other groups, then you can kind of eventually drown out ADOS, replace ADOS. And I hate to use that word because it gets a negative connotation when you align it, because you hear the crazy folks on the right side there. But when you kind of you displace or replace like the voting block, the story, the power that we have that's kind of not fully used and untapped, and that kind of goes away. So I feel like this time right here, where they're telling us shut up, vote for Biden, don't worry about it, you hold them accountable. I don't know how we're supposed to do that, that's kind of like, it's just a way of punting and making us be quiet and it's almost like you keep doing that until you can't do anything about it anymore. Right now, like, we can inflict some type of consequence, and moving forward, that's not going to be the same type of opportunity. And kind of moving forward, did you have something you want to add, Nah?
Let's try to. Is my mic still low?
No, you sound good.
Okay. I don't know what's wrong with this thing. I'm going to try to get through it. But if it keeps going in and out, just tell me, just let me know when it sounds too crazy. But we did have some questions in the chat I had put up on the screen. I think it was Deanna S. asked the question about, I want to find it. I should have just stayed right there with it. But it was about Nina Turner and Cornel West starting a third party. I'm me personally, I am all for that idea. I'll just have to be honest. So if I'm not, there it goes. Let me put it up there. What y'all think about Dr. West and the People's Party starting a third party? So I mean, I agree with it, but for me, the message is the code, right? That if it's not centered on making ADOS right, then what are we creating? Are we creating another BIPOC situation here where we just include everybody and our issues get painted over with a broad brush, and then eventually we still wind up on the back burner? You know, like I have to question it, right? But I agree with wanting a third party. I believe that it's needed. I know we might not have the capital, et cetera, to do that, but at the end of the day, people power is very, very strong, and a vote, in my opinion, a ballot is worth more than $100 bill. So, you know, y'all brothers speak to that.
Yeah, you want to jump in, Reggie? Let me say this real quick. What I think. I think it's something, because we talked about this the other night on Sarnetta's channel. Somebody brought the same thing up. I think it's something that definitely should be explored as we move forward, right? I don't know that we're prepared for that right now, but I definitely think it's something that should be explored, and maybe we should move in that direction ultimately. In terms of for this election, I don't see that as a realistic thing, but
I wanna real quick. I don't mean to cut you, but this was another question I wanted to get to. The brother El Mahib said,
I was going to ask Reggie Reggie to explain that for the people, the Democratic down ballot strategy. That was what I was going to ask him following this here, you know. But yeah, I do think that I just don't know if Cornel West and Nina Turner have the pull to actually to draw people in to something like that, really taking that on as a serious option. You know, what do you think about that, Reggie? And if you can, maybe go into explaining the Democratic down ballot strategy for the people.
I agree with you, insofar as that, it's a good end goal, but now's not the time to jump ship to a third party, perhaps. Not knocking what, the good doctor and Nina are saying, but we would have to lay the foundation for that. Do we have enough people? And we would certainly need to have a coalition of people, but it'd have to be, based on principles, our ADOS principles, kind of the same way that, Teray and Hamilton and Black Power talked about, the 3 steps: self-identification, closing ranks, and then setting coalitions based on our values, and on those first 2 steps. Democratic down ballot, pretty much what it, because a lot of people get hung up on the Democrat part of the down ballot, but the reality is it's just an acknowledgement that the vast majority of Black people in this country vote Democrat, and they do so for a reason. Not saying whether that's good or bad, but it is an acknowledgement of that. It's an acknowledgement of where our leverage is in terms of the vote, and it's just an acknowledgement of some of the policies. I mean, granted, reparations is the heartbeat. Nothing moves without reparations, but I don't see a scenario where someone would consider, well, let me go over to the Republicans where they have these crazy tax cuts that go all the way to the top. Granted, the Democrats aren't much better, but when you're voting on those specific issues, in terms of expanding Medicaid, given the health disparities, dealing with climate change, which ain't a bad idea, and environmental racism, a lot of these things the Republicans just ain't for. So just this talk, I'm not really trying to coddle this 10% that just jumped out the window, be they independent or Republican. And I speak as someone who is registered as an independent. I'm not a registered Democrat. But that said, the Democrat down ballot, that if you vote your interest, in a lot of ways you'll find yourself with the Democrats on a local level. Now, there's some nuance there because, you know, you may have the people to flip a Republican. A shout out to Mark Stevenson in Ohio. His people flipped a Republican judge, got them to bend the knee to the ADOS agenda, and they put a Republican judge in office. Pissed off a lot of Democrats, but that Republican judge is in the pocket of ADOS in Ohio. So as you go down the ticket, you know, you vote your interest, you know, you gather the people together. But the main thing, you know, if you're hung up on the Democrat thing, that's fine. Leave the top blank. Like if we want to run off and do the third party, we can talk about that in the future if we want to push the Democrats further. But we deny them our vote because neither the Democrats nor the Republicans have earned it. And if you feel like you need to go all the way down ballot and just write ADOS in from the presidency down to dog catcher, I go ahead and do that, but show up. And at the end of the day, there are ballot questions that affect you locally. Right. I'm sure you have an opinion. Like if something comes on the ballot, like, do we paint the side of this barn red or green? That affects you locally. Like vote on that. You know, there's ballot initiatives, you know, whether it's, you know, new taxes or, you know, it could be like some of the cannabis laws that are moving through the country. You may have
like in Florida. I remember recently in Florida, they had something where it was what was this earlier this year? It was last year where they were talking about can felons vote? You know, letting felons reinstating the voting rights for felons. So I mean, like, yeah, like just to add that to your point, if now imagine our people are the ones that really law was targeted at, because you know they target the arrest, they target the lock, they target railroading you in the courtroom, they target all of these type of things. We're targeted with property, all this is targeted. So it's targeted to create felonies, and that's targeted at disenfranchisement. So what do we look like not showing up to vote on that as a referendum or whatever the case may be on a ballot? That's the reason why you have to show up. Now, because some people say, well, we need to show our power. We don't need to show up. We don't need to vote. Look, you cannot show power without showing up. That doesn't make any kind of sense. That doesn't make any kind of sense. And I wanted to also talk to, because I hear some people say, well, we need to Democrats, why are you voting Democrat down ballot? It's a lot of Republicans out here. The Democrats ain't do nothing. How you show power is you vote for Republicans, because once they see Republicans that we voting for Republicans, then they're gonna really start pulling out all the stops to get that vote back. You know, and then I hear people naming all kind of Republican candidates, like the chick Kim Klacik out in Baltimore. Yo, y'all seen her? The chick.
They crazy. I mean, it's like we have to stop being reflexive and emotional, because like she walked through Baltimore. I guarantee you that was like the first time she walked those streets. So,
with her heels on.
Like with her heels and you know, walking around and saying what the Democrats ain't doing, but it's like go look at her platform. It's like what is she about? Like they only throw these people out there to get you mad about the Democrats, and there's plenty to be mad about, but show me your platform. And again, that's why we say at the top of the ticket, leave it blank, because neither the Democrats nor the Republicans got anything for us. And I'll also say this, that as quiet as it's kept, you know, I've had conversations, you know, with people within the party as far as Massachusetts. You know, there's, you know, exchanges online, and there are people that work, you know, for the Democratic Party, that they actually watch, you know, for these down ballot voters, to where they say these people cared enough to show up and vote their displeasure. So the onus is now on me to figure out why that vote didn't make its way over here. So a vote of no confidence in the Democrats or the Republicans or the two-party system, it's still a vote. Like, if enough people show up and it's doubt, like it worked in Michigan. That's one of the reasons that that Clinton lost the state, because a bunch of people, you know, they were tired of Snyder, of course, you know, he's poison in the water. And then, you know, the Democrats at the top had nothing to say. So they're like, all right, these choices are not our choices, down ballot. And so right. I would just say, come back and do it again, because like they're rehashing the same thing. Because not only is, and this is just how I see it, not only is Harris Obama 2.0, she is Hillary Clinton 2.0. Because what I observed is that a lot of Hillary's people went over to Harris. That's why they won't let it go. Like, this is a group of vicious and entitled people. Like that whole Clinton machine, just entitled. Like, what I say goes. This is supposed to. And that I feel like that's why they got Joe to sit down somewhere when Hillary, you know, was running. Joe kind of felt. I mean, granted, you know, his son passed, but he was kind of ready to go. I feel like the Clintons was like, nope, this is me. And now they're back again with Harris with that same level of entitlement, still defending the Clintons. Like, it's like they're not even here for the party. I think they're like here for the Clinton machine. Like that, to put Harris in the White House is to put Hillary Clinton in the White House.
That's right.
I agree with that. Like, get her all the way out of here.
I had a question that I had pulled up. I'll be trying to follow the chat and do the show at the same time. Sometimes that just don't be working. And I don't want to just ignore the chat. I like to put the good comments up and you know, represent everybody's thoughts and feelings, even some of the ones that may be antithetical to the platform, so that, you know, we could address
some of that needs to be addressed, you know, too.
We could do our little pinata thing on some of that stuff. But it was a question.
Yeah, let me. I wanted to kind of move to something else. You know, we've seen that, like this. For those of you who don't know, our platform primarily is talking about being a reparationist. You know, creating reparationists. We need to create a mass movement of people that are advocating for reparations on every opportunity. You know, when you get on TV, we need to have people talking about reparations. You know, if we had it our way, the NBA players on the back of their jersey, they would be saying reparations. Now, I don't know. They should have known that already. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if the NBA banned them from putting that on there, or nobody really pressed the issue. But I don't see how we can have all this going and the topic of reparations can be brought to the national discussion and nobody's doing that.
I just want to
create reparationists. Reparations.
Right. Let me interject real quick. I want you to continue your thought, but that just made me think about how I started off tonight's broadcast based on what Sister Yvette Carnell was breaking down about those gatekeepers. And what I think with a lot of the entertainers and sports players is, once they reach a certain tax bracket, they get brought into this club, right? Let me just go back and read this real quick, where he says, in speaking about the Boule class, our kind of people, he says Bryant Gumbel is, but Bill Cosby isn't. Lena Horne is, but Whitney Houston isn't. Andrew Yang is, but Jesse Jackson isn't. And neither is Maya Angelou, Alice Walker, Clarence Thomas, or Quincy Jones. And even though both of them try extremely hard, neither Diana Ross nor Robin Givens will ever be. So I think, and this is just a calculation that I have, is that a lot of them, once they reach a certain tax bracket, they reach out to a certain type of people. Jay-Z said on one of his songs, when I think it was the one where he was like, I'm about to turn Havana to Atlanta. And he talked about him and Obama chilling on the beach, drinking or something like that. It was a minute ago since I heard it. So now they feel like, I got Obama's number. I could call the president up at any time. But you ain't got the dudes in the hood number, you know what I'm saying, where we need this political power of moving our politicians to move our specific policy. So when you said that, it made me think of that. But go ahead, brother. I had to interject that real quick.
No. I mean, that's key there. So I mean, I was just trying to say we like this. We are moving the national discussion for reparations forward. We're trying and we're making an extreme effort to keep this conversation at the center of the discussion. You know, because part of what we see now with Harris is when you split Black voters, when you split the Black voice, and you have a whole lot of like, you created the opposition from Black women and trying to make it about being a Black woman. It makes it to where it makes having this discussion about reparations a little or way more hard to have, because now we come facing the opposition from that standpoint. I wanted to transition though, if we could talk about the problem that we see with the local reparations issue, and how that ties also into the national reparation program or legislation, the study bill, and the problems we have with that and how we need that fixed. Reggie, do you want to get into your campaign about fixing HR 40?
Well, I mean, it's not my campaign necessarily. It's just, just groups of ADOS people around the country who are, or organizing people to call representatives to rewrite HR 40 and amend HR 40 in line with Dr. Daugherty's written testimony at the first HR 40 hearing, calling for, changes such as, instead of starting the claim from 1619 to 1776, it's very easy to go in court and just get the whole thing thrown out. Like I could do it. I could just go to court and say, there was no America in 1619. This is not valid. Shut it down. It's like just simple stuff. I mean, and of course, the criteria, you definitely got to have a budget, put some money on it, that should go out to the defined group, which is ADOS, kind of like a down payment on the house, like earnest money, a down payment to let you know that we have a deal, throw $1 trillion on it at execution to throw that out. No salary for commissioners, because like when we looked at it, it's like almost 200 grand. Like that's a crazy bag if you drag it out for 5 years. You'd be like, oh my goodness, like this is some serious reparations work. This is going to take me about 4 years, and then you could just skate off with $1 million and not having done anything. Calling for experts, in the field, intergenerational economists such as Sandy Daugherty, people who know about stratification economics. Again, Sandy Daugherty, sociologists, historians, people that not just activists. Because if you just throw activists, they're just going to pound the table and say reparations now, but like based on what and how do you roll that out? People who know about budget and policy, because the goal is to craft a reparations package. That's a framework for that should come out of the commission. Anything short of that, is a failure. And and there's other things as well.
Indeed.
Yes, indeed.
Yes, brother. I know, brother Ali. We talk every single day, and we were looking at the Evanston, Illinois reparations bill and just laughing at how nonsensical it is. And we were crunching some of the numbers from that proposal. Did you have any of that pulled up, Brother Ali, that you wanted to speak to?
Well, I'd have to go off the top just from what I remember of it. You know, we got some numbers, and I think it has something to do. It has something to do with like setting out $1 million a year for 10 years for the Black people of Evanston, right? And it's not specific to ADOS people. It's just Black people. It's a Black thing. And so when we did the numbers based on the last census count for Evanston, and kind of like broke it down by the Black population, the way that thing worked out from what we were able to come up with was something like $74 a year for each Black person. Right. And this is what they're this is what they calling reparations. It was something like literally like $74 and change a year for 10 years for each Black person in Evanston, based on the amount of money that they, you know, which is like $1 million a year, something like that. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think that these people are actually anti-reparationists. I think what they're really trying to do is figure out ways to set up these kinds of quote unquote reparations deals in different cities around the country where there's money involved in it, so that them and their organizations can get money from different cities, right? If they can do, like, think about it, if they can do this in Evanston, because the same people are behind all of it, right? It's the same two organizations behind all of these local things, these local pushes. And so if they can get those things done and then get the national thing done with those type of salaries and stuff, these people they're going to cake.
Making $1 million a year. You got 10 cities, you're on the commission, you on 10 commissions, making 100,000.
Yeah, and a big problem.
Oh, hold up real quick. So $74 a person a year. And this is supposed to be coming from what, cannabis sales or something? The dispensary. Yeah, so basically they're giving you a free eighth on Juneteenth per year. You know. Is that what it is?
Like you get an eighth, like roll that up. That's your reparations.
That's your reparations. You just get weed reparations. What's up? You get a one free per year. You good.
See, what I think is that they're trying to create a footprint to say that once HR 40 gets passed and it's Senate companion bill, because that has to be a part of the play. Like there's so many layers to this whole thing, which is why ADOS becomes a what is it? A thorn in the lion's paw, right? And I believe that Narcan and Cobra are trying to set themselves up so that they could say, but look what we got done in Evanston. Asheville, North Carolina was the result of our doing. What's going on in California and all of these different places, they can somehow make it appear as if we got these initiatives passed in these locations. So we are best suited to be on the commission. We don't necessarily have to be scholars or
I didn't even think about that, man.
Economists, et cetera, et cetera. So this gives them the way. Brother Logic.
Can you hear me? Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Am I clear or no?
Yeah. You kind of low, bro.
Yeah, you're good, bro.
All right. So one thing I just wanted to say about what y'all was just breaking down, there's a couple really important things when you're talking about these local initiatives that are being called reparations, right? For one, with the we did a program on the Asheville thing. I suggest people go back and check that program out. We fleshed out some really good information. But in regards to the Illinois, the Evanston one, the way that they're tying their funding source up in the special tax of marijuana is kind of going to be on it's the part that makes it not reparations, and it's the part that ultimately will be the reason why this isn't a viable model nationally. right? So once you tie a funding project like reparations up in taxation, you create a number of problems. Now we can't really dedicate a solid number because it's dependent upon the success of that tax. You understand? So we can't really, you can say, yeah, we're going to do $1 million for 10 years, but anything can happen in the market, and the marijuana industry go belly up. Now they can't make good on that. That tax ain't coming in. So now that right there shows you one of the paramount limitations of the local so-called reparations project. It doesn't really have the funding capacity to take such a undertaking on, right? And then as far as NARC and then Cobra setting up these so-called, what they're saying are models, and many of their articles and what they're saying these could be national models, they really can't be considered anything but experiments right now, because until we can weigh out the success, they can't really say favorably or not favorably whether their involvement in these things are going to contribute to whatever they could bring to a national project, because no one knows the success of these things. So they can't use that to say, well, I was involved in this. Well, we don't know if that thing worked. Just because you get something passed doesn't mean that we know if the effect of that thing was going to be for the good or for the bad. So these programs, if they ever get off the ground and get passed, they have to be evaluated for the length of the program's enactment, and see what the cost and what the benefit was, and if it all made sense. I mean, on face value, we already talked about how it really doesn't make any sense. They could call this anything but reparations, because it's not reparations. You don't have any type of reparative justice coming in, and the criteria that they have set up around these local projects are weak, loose criteria that doesn't specify any specific group that was specifically harmed. One point before I take it back to y'all, like we pointed out in the Asheville piece, many of the people that they were trying to target with their initiative based on historical redlining and whatnot, we saw that many of them people don't even live in the area no more. So you have targeted an area instead of the specific group that actually deserves the justice. You've given justice to locations and not to victims of specific harm. So we will see a lot of those clumsy attempts as, Narcan and Cobra move forward, because they don't have the constituency to really pull off a national push and make it loud and make it strong. So those of us with the constituency have to understand what we need to do with our advocacy and political action to get the national thing done. And to me, that would be a focus on the congressional legislative body of the federal government. And I'll back up.
No doubt.
I totally agree with them. And one of the big problems with the whole idea of local reparations is number one, the language that I'm seeing in a lot of these pushes, as Brother Marlon from Chicago so rightly points out often, what they are talking about, like when you actually look at the policies being proposed, what they are talking about is equity. Equity is not the same as reparations and repair. And also, when you start to localize it and talk about states, like, well, I'm gonna go over to this state and do this, and I'm gonna go over to this state and do that, I could tell you exactly where that leads, and it's a out for any Democrat or Republican. They can both say, "Hey, reparations, that's a great idea and a great discussion. Let the states figure it out." It can't be a state issue. Like, slavery was a national institution. It built the nation benefited, so the nation must pay. And if there's any legislation that just absolutely has to happen in the state, I would say I would defer to the ADOS in California's language, to where they specifically, you put in the recipient group, which is us, ADOS, and also you make it clear that upon execution of a national reparations program, that it's subsumed by that. So like whatever California tries to figure out, it goes away as soon as national reparations kicks in. Because if you leave it up to the states, it's going to be a problem. And the brother just brought up a good point. Did the Japanese internment victims or Holocaust victims receive local reparations? That's an excellent way to frame it.
Excellent way to frame it.
I wanted to bring up. Go ahead, Ali. Before I go in,
I was going to say, to the point Brother Reggie just made, you have, even with the local initiative in California, you still, it's like this is a fight. Like I know ADOS knows this, but just understand that this is a fight, because even with the language that's in there, those people are going to work to try to undermine that language, the specificity of who the beneficiaries should be. Those two organizations are going to work to undermine that particular language. You better believe it, right? And I respect and appreciate the work that the family did out there, but those people they're fighting against it. Just know that. Just know that.
Oh yeah.
So
I was going directly to that. You already knew. You threw me the alley-oop. Both of y'all threw me the alley-oop. If you can bring up my screen, I'm gonna show y'all exactly what we're talking about. So this is AB 3121, Task Force to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals for African Americans. This is the California state bill. So this is different than like Evanston and Asheville, which are like smaller cities, which is what we call local reparations. But this is a state bill that was put into place to look at pretty much being like the state level HR 40, right? So, and we see that just like they were describing that there was a fight. Can y'all see my screen, or should I blow it up a little bit?
You could blow it up a little bit.
All right, let me blow it up a little bit. Hold on.
And I'll expand it to make it full screen once you do
Let me blow it up a little bit.
yeah, that should be good. Once you expand it, that's good right there.
All right, yeah.
All right, cool. So what we see is anytime you see this language where it's in red and it's struck out, that means it was changed. But understand, this is just the most recent edit that they made. So when we talk about the ADOS California group that was advocating to get this language changed, in the beginning it was to study proposals for African Americans. Then they got it changed to specifically African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States, right? So I want to know, who in the world is the person or the group that is fighting to get that language changed? Like, because think about this. Now it reads to develop reparations proposals for not African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. African Americans with a special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved. Well, hold on, what are you talking about? Like, who else was enslaved in the United States? Who else done been through all of that? We already know the numbers. See, people playing like we don't know the numbers. We know the numbers. As of in the 1960 census, before that, on the 1960 census, I think this is according to Smithsonian, but I even looked it up myself, just doing some census research, and I couldn't find like with specificity, but I'm just trying to tell you, it was a small number. And it's often said less than 1% of the total Black population in America then was not a descendant of slavery, was not from the Caribbean or African. That percentage that was not a descendant of slavery was very, very minute. So like, what are we talking about? Talking about looking at reparations proposals for people that come from that group, and why would you strike out the group that has been the longest with the grievance, right? Who suffered the most horrendous injustice and still suffer, to include all African Americans? That would include somebody that just came over here today. But you
right,
special consideration. So understand, guys, this is a fight that's happening in real time. This is not something that, oh, we can do a victory lap. No, this is we're gonna have to still, not only we fighting the racists and the white supremacists and the people who want to keep the status quo. We fighting people who are trying to steal, but that look like us. That's the crazy part. Now it's other language, and y'all can read this bill, but it's other language here that's changed. That's the key one that I wanted y'all to see.
Before you go to the rest of it, go back up, because I want to explain something, because I want to make sure people understand what they're actually doing. What they're doing is they're trying to group everybody into the African. This language is telling you that there are more people here that are called African Americans than just the people who are descendants of persons enslaved. So what they're trying to do is use the term African American to include all Black people. Because if you look at what the OMB, which stands for the Office of Management and Budget, has done with Federal Directive 15 and on census documents, you'll see that since 1977, well, I don't know if it's since 1977, but what you'll see is that African American has become synonymous with the Black race in the United States. And so they know that, and they're able to use that terminology to try to include all Black people in the United States, but then they'll say with a special consideration for African Americans who are descendants of persons enslaved. But just to understand, we want all Black people to receive, or all African Americans, because African American is synonymous with the Black race. If you don't believe me, look it up. You'll see that on the federal census, African American / Black is underneath what they call the racial classification for Blacks. So what they're doing with this is telling you this is language, I'm sure, changed by either NARCA and COBRA. What they're trying to do is have all Black people included in this particular reparations proposal they have here. But you can move on.
Yeah, and I wanted to just say.
Let me say something.
Go ahead, bro.
We can't hear you, Logic.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I just wanted to say what Ali was saying is so important, right? And understand this. This is politics, you all. You understand? So when we say we're doing politics, understand that this is a part of it. Politics is a war without bloodshed. So you are fighting literally for your lives through legislation and with the power of the pen and policy. But as a constituency, we have to see these changes being made, and then we have to buy the pushback. Once you make your change, you can't think that the fight is over with and they're just going to be like, okay, well, we're just going to accept their changes and let them have what they want. No, it's a fight. They're going to fight back, and we have to fight back and continue that process until this thing gets all the way refined. So whoever is in that locality, needs to be, getting in contact with those people that sit on this committee wherever this bill is being debated, and make sure that they are given the proper pushback, and that not only, I don't know what's going on in California with COVID, if everything is on, they're doing all Zoom sessions or whatever. But normally, without a COVID situation, you can go into these committee meetings and hear the debates. You can watch and see who's voting on what. And it should still be archived on the state website. You can still see who's voting for what and read the minutes and see what's going on. Then you know who's doing what. Then you know whose phone you got to call. And you know who you got to send some emails to, and whose age you got to bump into and start talking to. So understand this is a fight, and that we got to keep fighting, and that you obviously they wanted it to be an all-inclusive, flat black initiative, but I think that's why when the brother Reggie was talking about the edits that need to be made, I think that time period is very important, because now, even though there's never going to be a grifter-proof way to frame this thing, you can create and craft the criteria in such a way that it takes care of that. So if the criteria is the criteria. Now, if you want to say everybody should get it, be like, okay, cool. But everybody should get it if they can link themselves into this particular time period. So if you were here, so if they want to say that Jamaicans were here, everybody was doing this and everybody was doing that, we understand it's the whole spine and the legs of the legislation was built on chattel slavery and Jim Crow. So you have to at least be able to connect into that history. So if you can say can connect to a lineage line, a linking to a temporal period from 1776 to 1965, which many of them cannot do. We already know the numbers. The numbers would be so insignificant, right? They want to say, well, you had these people. Well, prove that you're related to them. Just because there's a Jamaican presence in America, or there were some Jamaicans here in America, don't mean that those were your family members. So you have to connect into that lineage, and what you will find is that problem will get rid of itself because they can't meet the criteria. So if the criteria is set up a certain way, which we have to be criteria focused on this thing, if we can get that criteria etched in stone, it will take care of a lot of the grifters just on the merit of meeting the qualification.
Exactly.
I think also another point, in terms of the very few of our Caribbean brothers and sisters that were here, during 60s, 70s, or whatever, I don't see any type of scenario where all 10,000 of those Caribbeans that were in New York or wherever else, all 10,000 just stayed to themselves. They were intermarrying with ADOS people. So as such, their progeny are ADOS and entitled to reparations under the ADOS framework. So I feel like a lot of these, I think Yvette's term was Africans, they're like shooting themselves in the foot. Like fam, your grandfather's ADOS. Hush and come over here and help. I think that's what a lot of what is going on, that some of these people need to be educated. Like, look, you jumping on my neck and you're owed the same debt that I'm owed. It's these people crazy, man.
That's right. Yeah.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah,
hold on,
that's
brother
right.
Josh.
That's right.
Ali want to pull his screen up real quick, and then we're going to get back to the bill. You're muted, Ali.
Yeah, this is from the United States Census, right? I just want them to see this so you can really understand what I'm saying. About the Census, the United States Census Bureau must adhere to the 1997 Office of Management and Budget, which I mentioned, OMB standards on race and ethnicity, which guide the Census Bureau in classifying written responses to the race question. So now they list a bunch of races, or what they consider to be races: white, black, or African American. See, they put that together. Black or African American. See, these things they're conflating it, right? And it's all one thing as far as they're concerned. And so that's why you'll get Caribbean people who can, at certain points, they'll say, I'm African American. Remember, we were talking to the brother Garfield, right? And what Garfield say, he considers himself African American, right? But he's a Jamaican, right? So they get to jump in and out of that because for America, African American and black is actually a synonymous term. So you see it right here inside of the United States Census breakdown on racial classification. So I just wanted to show that to the family, and we can go back to the other bill.
So one quick note about the census. What's happening this year is, like, when the census takers go out, what's on the census now, and this is important, especially in terms of ADOS and specificity, that within the term Black or African American, there is a question under that question that says, okay, what is your ancestry? To where, is it Caribbean? Is it Dominican? Is it Brazilian? Or is it just African American or ADOS? Which I put in when I filled out the census. So that specificity you're going when the next census data comes out, we're going to start to see a disaggregation of that data, and that's also why it's important that ADOS be given a specific category, because as you pointed out, Garfield, and he likes to play that game. I've seen him talk. Like one day Caribbean, another day African American, depending on what argument he wants to make, just to shoot down the ADOS position. So that specificity cuts through all of that, and thankfully the census is headed in that direction. But we have to call for that specificity, because also what happens, and I've had this discussion with lawmakers towards like, why can't you just say, when we're talking even when we're talking Black agenda generally, if you come out and say African American or Black, they will shut you down in court. So I don't know who is running up behind ADOS in California and rewriting this language, but you could potentially get this thrown out in court. Like there's no lawmaker that I know of that I could just come to and say, this is for African Americans, because they'll just take it to court and say, this is unconstitutional. Yes, unconstitutional, violates the Equal Protection Clause. Even though it was meant for us, they turn around and weaponize it. It's literally, simply stated, reverse racism is a thing in the eyes of the court. Towards like, if you include Black people and exclude white people, according to the courts and a lot of interpretations, that is discriminatory. I mean, it sounds crazy, but that's exactly what it is. That's why you have to carve out that's why the inclusion and the exclusion is important. They did it with the Japanese Americans and internment. They did it with the Jews who went through the Holocaust, because there were some, not all of the Jews were not there. So you had to have criteria there. So it's the same path for ADOS.
Absolutely. That's why all the language has to be victim-based and not race-based, because if you tie it into the crime, and you'll know who the victims of that crime are. You don't have to say what race they are, because being connected to that crime is self-identifying, and we'll also know who the perpetrators of that crime are also, because the time frame and the power go together. We know who was in power at the time. We know who had the ability to do these things and execute these things. And there was only a certain amount of people in the country at the time. So all of the raw data will tell the story. You don't have to say, oh, for Black folks, this and that. If you set the criteria up the way it's been set up now, it takes care of that already. But in the legislation has to be victim-based on who were the victims of this atrocity, who were the historians. Now once you understand who those victims were, that's why we have the term American descendant of slavery, right? When you say I'm an American descendant of slavery, nowhere in that acronym did you hear I'm Black or Negro. Now as far as criteria, connecting yourself to that lineage or self-identifying as Negro, Black, or what's the other one they had on their colors for African American, for the purposes of linking you to that on a federal document 12 years prior to enactment of a commission or an actual reparations project. That makes sense when you're talking about how the criteria is going to be spelled out, because it all fits in with the timing and the framing of it. And like I said, when you set it up that way, anyone trying to just jump in on a flat blackness thing really has a lot of work to do. And the criteria cut the legs out of all that grift chasing once it's set up and implemented. You really kind of solve that problem with that.
Oh yeah. And I wanted to just say something based on what this language in the bill is saying. So it says, like, the lingering negative effects of the institution of slavery and the discrimination described in paragraphs 5 and 6 of the subdivision on living African Americans in the society in California, United States. The interesting thing is about this particular bill, it's like, what do you think California, what is it you really expect California to do? I know they say they want to take the information that comes from this study and have it disseminated to Californians so they can learn the history. I think that's important. I think that's good, even for building the case for national reparations, being that California is arguably the most influential state, if not the most, is right up there with of any state in the country. I think that's important, but I don't know what you really can do or expect California to be able to do as far as reparations, because look, at a baseline, the primary goal of reparations, it should be, acknowledgement, redress, and closure. But at a baseline, reparations is supposed to close the racial wealth gap. It's supposed to close the gap between white wealth and black wealth at the mean. That's not something that California or any state in the union can do. No state in the United States has the power to issue its own currency. So therefore, no state in the United States can implement reparations. So what this can do, if they want to say what they should do, they didn't even say what they really, all that they think that studying the proposals is supposed to do, or what the proposal is supposed to come back and say. They didn't put any framework behind that in this bill. But whatever they want to make suggestions for California to do, it wouldn't be reparations. It could be fixing some injustices, and another thing, when you want to talk about who, like, California is not America. California shouldn't have, I mean, I don't understand why they think that California should have to answer for and atone for something that was done by all of America.
That's right.
California is late to the game in the union. California, and then when you look at who was there foundationally for California, it was us. Like I was reading the book, Richard Rothstein's book, Color. What was that book? Color of Law.
Yeah, Color of Law.
And in that book, he described how we were a part of the original workforce when California first started to be built up, and how we would segregate it. I mean, how we were in housing segregated when they first started building like large project buildings in large neighborhoods. Like we would get the crap neighborhoods near the terrible places, and how when they would, as far as jobs, like we were last on the list for employment, all these type of things. But we were the ones who were leaving the South and escaping Jim Crow, going out there. Nobody else was fleeing Jim Crow to go to California because nobody else was here. So they may have been fleeing some type, or coming here for opportunity in California. So who exactly would it even be repairing? Like that's why this language of using reparations I don't care if it's a city or a state, it's just wrong. It just does not need to be called reparations. And here, man, we talked about, somebody brought up the point, Japanese Americans and how nobody offered local reparations for them. Now, we know probably most Japanese Americans today, I believe, is in California. But the internment camps were not, for the most part, in California. A lot of them were scattered all over. I think it was one in Wyoming or something. It was Texas, and yeah. So they didn't go to Texas and Wyoming reparations. They went to the federal government, And if y'all don't mind, I want to read a powerful article, or a couple excerpts from a powerful article. I'm gonna stop sharing this one.
All right.
I want to read a couple. Go ahead.
Because Ali got something pulled up.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
But what I want to do is I want to come back to the guest real quick and see if you had anything to say on that, and then Brother Ali can go to what he has pulled up, and then you could come back, George. But before we do that, I just want to say again, I am of the belief that in Cobra and NARC, they're not even serious about anything serious happening with these local reparations programs. They just want to say, look at the advocacy that we have done. Look at what we've done in California. Look at what we've done here. Look at what we've done there. So the fight that's going on with the bill in California, show it basically, we see by the language who's redrafting the corrected language. So, I mean, it's obvious, and we have to stay diligent in that fight. We have to stay diligent in that fight. We cannot let them win. We have to fight them every step of the way, because for them, reparations is not serious. It is just another way for them to get up to $200,000 a year on a commission, and the people that they appoint on any type of subcommittees that come out of HR 40. So we have to stay on this fight, family. Brother Reggie, you wanted to speak to that?
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what you're saying, the biggest problem, or one of the biggest problems that I have with the approach, and not only in terms of what's been happening with state reparations, but also around national reparations, the biggest problem that I have is the stated position by NARC within their 10-point plan. I believe it's in the preamble. But I would just want to pause and encourage everybody to go and actually read their 10-point plan, the preamble, the statements that follow and the statements that they have surrounding reparations. The biggest problem that I have is the calling for the establishment of a national reparations trust authority. And what their stated position is that any and all resources that come out of a reparations package, whether state or local, be put into that reparations trust authority, which would be run by these people. I am totally against any type of trust authority, whether it's NARC and COBRA or even a group of ADOS people. You give those resources directly to the recipients to whom it is owed. Now, granted, there are some parts of the reparations packages or rollout that may need to be administered by some type of authority. You know how they have the Bureau of Indian Affairs and stuff like that, that there could be some kind of trust authority to administer those types of specific targeted programs for ADOS. But in terms of the resources, I am against that going to any type of unelected, unaccountable body to just say, well, I'm going to throw this money here and I'm going to throw this money here. No, you give it directly to the people to whom it is owed. And that's the biggest problem for me. Like that's something that I would absolutely, fight tooth and nail. Like no trust authority, no middlemen, no hierarchy, no counsel over what is done with the resources, specifically the cash payments that are owed to ADOS people. Like that's out. But y'all go read that, because it's a problem.
Yeah, definitely not from them, though. Yeah. No.
All right, so what we're looking at here is the 1988 Civil Liberties Act, right? And just to speak to, I just wanted to point out how our people are held to standards that other people aren't, right? Because we talked about how using the terminology Black or African American even will be considered unconstitutional. I've seen many European Americans make that kind of argument, even on Twitter, even to me, where they would say it's unconstitutional. It would amount to what do you call it? Man, I'll think of it, but they basically say it's unconstitutional, right? Because you can't legislate for a specific racial group or ethnic group. Nevertheless, when you look at the language of the 1988 Civil Liberties Act, very clearly they're using language specifically for certain people. The Aleut civilization, right? It says here, declares that the Aleut civilian residents of certain islands who were relocated during World War II remained relocated long after any potential danger had passed. If you go further down, it says Title I, the United States citizens of Japanese ancestry and resident Japanese aliens, right? So they're naming these people based on what would be considered their ethnic name in this country as Japanese Americans or people of Japanese descent. Yet when it comes to African Americans, they hold us to a different standard, even though the language is very clear in this document about what happened to a specific group of people named the Aleuts, or the people of Japanese descent. Just wanted to point that out. So as we're dealing with, anti-reparations is what I call them, and they make these arguments about it being unconstitutional to use these specific names, understand that these people have used names very clearly in legislation over the years with no problem. It's just a problem for us. It's a problem for us.
Exactly. They want to keep us at the bottom. They want
Yeah.
us to remain the doormats to the big house called the United States of America. Brother Josh.
Yeah, man. I got this article I wanted to bring up just because I thought the case, when you look at the Japanese Americans fight for reparations, I thought it was a real interesting thing to study. And you try to find correlations between that and our case and our fight for reparations. And, it's interesting. I would just encourage everybody to go and just read about it. There's several books out on it, but I want to read this whole article, but it may be a little bit too long to read it. So I'm just going to peruse and just go down here to just so you can learn about this. So it says John Tateshi was incarcerated at the Manzanar internment camp in California from ages 3 to 6. After the war ended, Tateshi and his family returned to Los Angeles, where Tateshi says they tried their best to assimilate. Decades later, in 1975, he and his wife became founding members of the local Japanese American Citizens League, JACL. As the civil rights organization's national redress director, Tateshi helped lead the eventual successful fight for reparations, but that fight came with significant resistance, not just from the American public at large, but from the Japanese American community itself, as Tateshi writes in his new book, Redress, in the inside story of the successful campaign for Japanese American reparations. All right, I might need to get that book. It says the conflict most often occurred between generations. I don't know if we got some Japanese / ADOS people listening, or straight up Japanese. Anybody that knows how to pronounce this, please correct me. The Nisei generation, who were born between 1910 and 1930 to immigrant parents, and the Sansei, who were either incarcerated at a very young age or born after the war. To process the trauma of the camps, Tateshi writes the Nisei generation embrace traditional values that encourage them to put the past behind them. Just forget it. For example, gaman means to endure or persevere with dignity, and shikatangai, shikataganai translates to it can't be undone or it can't be helped. Their careers and businesses were most upended by the internment, Tateshi says, but they were not interested in focusing on JACL's efforts for the government handout, quote unquote, of reparations. Sound familiar? Does all this language sound familiar, y'all?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Can you blow it up a little bit in your browser as well? So
No doubt.
they're
Yeah,
trying
let
to
me
read
blow it
along. But let me say, while you're doing that, yeah, that language does sound familiar, and it causes us to refine a lot of our pushback to some of what people say about, reparations coming from our own people. We're not going to let anybody else tell us about reparations and why we shouldn't receive it, and victimhood and all of this other nonsense. But that is really interesting.
And also the generational gap. So you got a lot of boomers that may not be pushing as hard as we pushing, or older generation people that may just be like, well, we just need to pull ourselves up. We just need to come together. No, this is serious. This is the government. This is what the government did to damage us. And I know it was nobody that thought about fighting for it back in. Well, I ain't gonna say they thought about it, but the fight would have been such an uphill climb. It was so fresh. It was so new. Now we see that the damage that was done. Now I don't want to tie our story in a direct alignment, you know, but there are some similarities that we can learn from. So, but let me keep reading. It says, but their children, the Sansei generation, grew up in the shadow of the civil rights movement. They came to see the internment camps as another form of racial oppression that needed to be spoken out against. By 1978, the JACL's redress campaign was officially launched, even as intergenerational disputes persisted. So check this out, y'all. Not only did the civil rights movement, you know, put the pressure on for the Immigration Act for other groups to come here, but it actually inspired the Japanese Americans to go after their reparations. And guess what? They got it. Ain't that something?
Yep.
That's deep. That's deep.
Yeah. But now, what about our reparations? You know, why they didn't? I mean, I'm not trying to discount the civil rights movement, but hey, we needed the reparations movement then, and we damn sure need one today.
Could you put
So
that link in the
ultimately, the JACL, the Japanese American community as a whole, and that community as a whole, came together over a collective obligation to uphold American ideals. See, we need to make, this is my attitude, we need to make America be American. We need to make them do what they say they're about, be what you say they're about. See, that's what the Japanese is doing. And finally, in 1988, a decade after the campaign began, over 40 years after the internment camps closed, President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act, which offered a formal apology and paid $20,000 to each survivor. And now this is where he did a question and answer. It says, I spoke with Tateshi about the redress campaign's challenges, educating the public about internment and implications for other reparations efforts. Now check this out, y'all. This is like him doing a question and answer with dude. So I hope y'all, I mean, this is powerful to me. So I hope y'all don't mind if I'm kind of lengthy with this. And y'all jump in if y'all want to say anything on this as I'm reading. Just cut me off and jump in. So he said, yes, the redress campaign happened over 30 years ago. Why did you decide to write this book now? Even after all these years, there's still a lot of people in the Japanese American community and in the mainstream media who don't quite know what actually happened. So I thought, I'm getting older, and this is the point at which I either tell the story publicly now or let it go for scholars in the future to interpret for themselves. There is this view that in the campaign, there was kind of a campfire kumbaya feeling, but it wasn't like that at all. There was an awful lot of conflict, a lot of disagreements, and a lot of anger. So yeah, Narc and Cobra, we having disagreements, and we know, hey, we need justice to be served. We don't need it to be an injustice like y'all are trying to do. Okay, and you know, let's just say once we do achieve reparations, we have to let this thing be known that we were fighting for our justice. And then there was some other nefarious players in the game that started talking about the fight of our justice, started putting stuff in place that make it seem like they're fighting for our justice, but it's a conflict, and we need to win this conflict. So this says, how did Japanese Americans cope after being released from internment camps? Check this out. We talked about internment camps among ourselves, but with our white friends, we never talked about it. It was embarrassing and shameful to say, well, I was in jail for 3 years. So we kept it as quiet as our parents did. And years later, we never talked to our children about it. The Japanese Zen philosophy is one that seeks harmony in the world. You don't air your grievances because it makes other people uncomfortable. No, we don't know nothing about that. One metaphor is a trickle of water coming down a hillside will always take the easiest route. We took that route. There was an enormous wall of silence in the Japanese American community. So what broke this wall of silence? During the 1960s and 70s, the Sansei generation, that's the younger one, would learn about the internment camps in a college class and go home and ask their parents about it. The parents would just say, shikata ganai, it can't be undone. But these kids were persistent. They needed to know what the truth was. And so a little at a time, they picked up more information and started going public with it, demanding some acknowledgement that the internment had happened. The voice of young Japanese Americans became codified within the JACL And the organization adopted the issue of reparations as a priority in 1978. But the redress campaign did not begin with very much support among the JACL's elders. Raising their voices in protest was anathema. I'm not familiar with this word, so forgive me if I mispronounce it, to their cultural values. And the Nisei generation was very proud of being American, proud enough that after they were stripped of their rights during the war, they volunteered to join the military. They went to Europe and the Pacific and fought for the United States. I mean, my God, you don't do that unless you want to show an extreme sense of loyalty to the U.S. government. When we brought up this issue of reparations, it was so against that patriotism. So it says, what made the Nisei generation change their minds? One thing that resonated for the Nisei generation was the message that this is not about us. This is about an issue. This is an issue that is about the Constitution and the future of this country. We were determined to pass the Civil Liberties Act as a way of having Americans recognize the injustice of what happened to us, not for our sake, but in order to make sure this never happened again. Yo, that's powerful right there, y'all. What y'all, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna keep going, but I want to just say, what do y'all think?
I just want to say, as you're reading that, and I'm thinking about Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, and there's in one of her chapters. Can y'all hear me? Because somebody said, like, okay. In one of her chapters, she speaks about the shame of our people coming home from prison and how the families dealt with that, you know, especially particularly those who were families who were grounded into the church. So there was this shame with a family member who had went to jail and came home. There were certain stigmas, et cetera, et cetera. So as you were reading that, it brought that to bear. And it made me think, it goes back into that older generation. Sister Friday Jones in the chat just says, I'm gonna put that back on the screen. We know all about that silence.
Yes.
My great grandma used to say, leave it alone. So as you're reading that, I'm thinking about that excerpt from Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, and then the sister put this comment. So we see basically, in certain aspects, it's the same fight, right? In certain aspects, the only difference is we don't have a president that's willing to apologize for slavery. We don't have a group of serious individuals ready to do a commission on our behalf so that we could get the redress, that the acknowledgement, redress, and closure that we deserve, that the Japanese Americans deserve. So as you were reading that, all of those different things popped in my head. So I definitely wanted to touch on that.
No doubt. So I'm gonna keep reading. Like I said, y'all just jump in if you see something you want to highlight. So it says that had enormous consequences in the thinking of the Nisei generation, who was willing to put on the American uniform after having lost all their rights. The redress campaign wasn't just about trying to gain monetary compensation. I mean, you figure 3 years of imprisonment and the 30 years of guilt and shame we live with, $20,000 wasn't going to abrogate all of that. But the money was part of the message. The American public didn't give a damn until the minute we started demanding compensation. Ain't that something? Ain't that something?
That's an interesting point. That's an interesting point. Like, you know, what I find interesting is like when we're having the conversation about reparations, is that they're going to everything else except that. Like, we're having conversations that we would have never had before. Like, let's do anything else. Like, I'm reminded that AOC jumps on the Democratic National Convention. Like, let's talk about colonization. Like, she wants to save the world, but like when it's time for reparations, you get confused, and just these aggressive pushes towards police reform, a lot of stuff that's been thrown out there in terms of qualified immunity. We would have never had these conversations before. I think they're they're pivoting, and I think it was Marianne Williamson who said this, that this happens, that the establishment is going to do whatever it has to do to protect the status quo. Let's throw this in here. Let's throw police reform in here. Let's throw in free college, and then Medicare for all. Let's do a Green New Deal. Let's throw all of these trillions around. But when you talk compensation, it just triggers something in the American psyche towards I'm not giving these niggas anything.
Yeah,
That's right. That's
yeah.
right. Did you want to read more? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to read. I didn't know if you was going to jump in, Ali. I want to read more because he gets into some more good stuff. It says, as a leader of the redress campaign, you spoke on radio programs about Japanese American internment. How did audiences react to learning about what happened in the camps? And this says, there was a huge hostility against us because people assumed that we were guilty of something, that we betrayed the United States, the country of our birth. People would say, oh, you're lying. Those camps never existed. Or they say, the government did what they did because they had good reason to do it. Because obviously in America, we don't put people in prisons unless they're guilty.
Wow. That almost sounds like stop resisting. Like if why you resisting? Like if you don't resist, maybe you won't get shot.
Yeah, right.
Well, we've discovered that's not necessarily true. It was all based on racism and had no who would have thought? It was all based on racism and had nothing to do with fact. And the one thing no one ever could present to me, either officially or people calling into talk shows, was any piece of evidence that would justify what happened to us. The reason they couldn't do that was there was no evidence that Japanese Americans were guilty of treason. So it says, the day after, this is another question, the day after 9/11, the JACL published a letter warning the U.S. to not racially profile Arab and Muslim Americans. Specifically, you urged Americans not to make the same mistakes as a nation that were made in hysteria of World War II following the attack of Pearl Harbor. Why did the JACL anticipate this reaction? It says, for Japanese Americans, there were certain parallels that were apparent between the attacks on Pearl Harbor and 9/11. We were being attacked on our own soil for the second time. There was an enemy who could be identified, and the individuals living in this country resembled the terrorists. In our case, the attack was by Japan, and we were an ethnic group who resembled the attackers. I would hear people say things about, hold on, let me not show that preview right now. It says, I would hear people say things about Arab and Muslim Americans that were similar to what I heard about us. There's no way we can identify those who are potential terrorists. You've seen what the terrorists can do, and here are these people who are walking around free. How do we know they're not going to bomb us? From our experience, we knew that fear overcomes reason very easily. I don't think there was an American on 9/11 who didn't feel a sense of fear, including those who are Arab and Muslim, but they had to fear something else that other people didn't have to, and that was the wrath of the American public. So let me read this right here. It says, what are your thoughts on reparations for slavery? I don't have any answers.
Oh, wow.
I don't have any answers. Our situation was very different. We didn't come out of the same historical experience. True. I can't think of any group that has suffered racism to the extent to the degree that Black Americans have. I know.
I think that's very interesting that other people can state that plainly, but we can't. As I feel like a lot of times when we kind of have these conversations that we're not allowed to speak for ourselves, like even Donald Trump can get up and say, Black Americans, you built the country and you haven't been acknowledged. And like nobody on the left said nothing. But here comes ADOS. We're Black Americans. We built the country. Oh, this is American exceptionalism. You think you better than is crazy. Like when we speak on ourselves, on behalf of ourselves, for ourselves, It always seems to be a problem. But this, and it's funny when Cornel West kind of said the same thing. He was like, when we first started seeing him really specifically uplift Yvette and Antonio in conversation, where he was talking about like nobody else in the world has kind of been Jim Crowed and Jane Crowed in the way that we did, and people got upset. But here's this Japanese person saying what Cornel West said, and it wasn't a problem. I just think that's interesting.
Oh, it's very,
very, very interesting.
yeah. So he says, I know that this kind of thing is never just about money, because money often doesn't resolve the problem. It goes much deeper than that. It's the whole issue of racism in America. Until there are efforts made to try to resolve the root causes and to get at the racism, it's going to be a tougher battle to move forward. I have no idea how you resolve something so profound, but we have to try. It can't just stagnate there and fester like a wound. Yeah, what do y'all think on that?
Well, I think when he when I'm reading it, I'm seeing that he's like just overwhelmed by it. Not saying that, oh my gosh, that was a long time ago, we can't do it. He's like, I don't know. I think part of him is acknowledging how grievous and sustained our specific experience in this country was. So what I hear from him is that he's just overwhelmed. Like, I don't know how to fix this, but I'm glad he says, but we have to try. We have to put something in place, to do that. So, I mean, and again, this is interesting. If ADOS says this, we're the Russians all of a sudden.
That makes me want to.
Dos Fidanias.
Yeah. So hearing this made me think of a couple things, right? And I'm glad Josh read it all, and I'm glad the brother just made the comments that he made. Now, this is a key insight onto what we need to do at this moment. And even though what Brother Reggie was saying was true, I think it might have missed some folks, right? This is why national support is important. And it's like one of the X factors to getting this thing done, because it hits different, like the brother just said, when you see that you have this Japanese group talking about the injustices, right? See, we can say it all day and they can be like, oh, they saying that they built the country stuff again. But when you start get the other groups in America to acknowledge it and be vocal about it, that starts turning into advocacy, right? Now we need to start setting fires to that, getting with these people and be like, listen, right? Maybe they don't know what their role could be. That's the reparationist job, to tell them what their role is and be like, listen, you don't need to understand how to fix this. All I need you to do is be loud and letting people know that it needs to be fixed. We know how to fix us. We don't need you. I don't know why they add, or why that he felt like he should say that. We know you don't know what to do, bro. We know what to do. All we need you to do is get behind us and get shoulder to shoulder with us and use whatever agency you got, especially being someone who is tied into a historic reparations program. You need to be with us and be advocating for us and be trying to organize with us. That's what you need to be doing, right? And any state actors who want to get involved in some reparations, we don't really need you making state commissions. What we need you is making state positions through your, if you're going to get your general assembly to put something together, put up together a demand for the national government to address reparations for Black America. Get your governor to make a public statement on the importance and the necessity of reparations for Black Americans, right? American descendants of slavery. Get these states to make these statements public and get them to talk to their, and you all and all of us talk to our members of Congress, right? And make that the national issue. Get these Japanese Americans who feel like justice needs to be served, just to get them to say that. Get them to speak to the situation and say, you know what, I believe they need justice in the same, their situation is different, but they need justice just like we needed justice. And that's all we need you to say. We done all the rest of the work. That's what these people need to understand the most. We don't need y'all to do anything but advocate with us. We know what needs to be done. We know what will fix us. We've already constructed this thing. But we got so many people going out there asking questions as if they are not, the authors of their own cure. Saying, what do I mean by that? So you got people who, I don't mean to be pivoting off to something too off topic, but I feel it ties in. So when you're going and you're demanding an agenda from somebody, instead of presenting them and demanding them be accountable to what you're telling them, so we have to have our own agenda crafted. Just like we got the wealth data, just like we got the history down, just like we got the criteria down. And we need to be telling people, this is what you will, as a representative of me, this is what you will advocate for, or there'll be political consequences. If we cannot offer a political consequence, we're going to continue to get they're going to just turn a deaf ear, and they're going to go and pivot to whoever can offer a political consequence, because we know it's about pressure. We know that. And without that consequence politically, that threat of being removed by out of office through vote or other political means, they don't care what you got to say, right? So what we understand is, what we need to do is take our agenda to them and get them to advocate what we demand from them. That's the takeaway I really want people to get from that. We always, you need to have it with you. When you go to these places and when you talk to these people, you need to be submitting to them the Black agenda. You got a great Black agenda right on ADOS101.com. Take that with you and tell them, this is what we need you to be doing. So I just wanted to say those few things because I know I missed some time.
Oh, definitely. Can y'all hear me? My mic good?
Yeah, you good.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, I was on Sarnetta TV on his platform last night, and I had to literally read from ADOS101.com about a Black agenda, because there were people in the chat. Yeah, right. It was people in the chat, and then you had this one brother that was on the panel talking about, we ain't got no Black agenda. So I had to go in and read. I read several of the pointers on Sarnetta's show last night, so that people could know that there is an agenda. But you got the panties, as they're called by ADOS, the Pan-Africanists, who congregate on this channel, making up all types of lies about ADOS. And now you don't know if this is something viable because you refuse to read it. And I just want to speak to what my brother Logic said real quick. Yeah, he's 1,000% correct. We need to start printing out the Black agenda from ADOS101.com, walking up to these politicians and handing them the printouts. And then on the next, when they have their town meetings, we can start asking the questions. Have you read the Black agenda that we're presenting for our people? Some people say my mic is still low. I don't know what's wrong with this thing, people, so just bear with me. But now you have something in your hand to give to them, as opposed to saying, what is your Black agenda? Most of these people are doing cookie cutter politics. They have cookie cutter answers to specific questions that we're asking. They don't really know how to answer questions any other way. That's why Biden told Charlemagne, if you don't vote for me, you ain't really Black. Yeah, we don't really have no way to answer the question that Charlemagne proposed to him. Why should we vote for just another rather old white guy? Like, what? Well, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. That didn't answer the question at all. You see? So whenever they got to go off script, then they're going to slip up and say something crazy. But if we keep presenting them with the agenda, there's no way they can get around it. Because then we could say, well, I stopped by your office, or I emailed you. I was in contact with your campaign managers, et cetera, et cetera. They asked for the email, and I emailed them a specific agenda for particularly if somebody was running for a congressional seat, let's just say. And I think that some impetus needs to be placed on drafting local Black agendas out of what's on ADOS101.com as well, and also to the needs of what's going on in a specific location. So, that's just something that we all could be building on in the very near future. So I just wanted to add that real quick. Brother Reggie or Ali, if y'all wanted to jump in.
I defer to Brother Reggie because I want to hear what he has to say. Now, like you said, we passed like the 2-hour mark, so I don't know where you want to go at.
We can stay on a couple more minutes.
Okay. Brother Reggie.
Yeah, just kind of piggybacking off of what you were saying, like I feel like a lot of the people who throw out the Pan-African argument aren't really Pan-African, because when you look at how a lot of it was formed in terms of theory and outlook, specifically by Kwame Nkrumah. I love his work where he talks about class structure, and I feel like when we bring out things like the Black agenda or like the ADOS 101 agenda, it really shows who is on the right side of the question, who's on the wrong side of the question. Because when you start to talk about specificity, it just doesn't have implications in terms of ADOS people. Like, this has implications all throughout the diaspora. And I would say this to my Black immigrant brothers and sisters. I've had a lot of back and forth conversations. Like, we have to get specific and find out which side of the question that you're on. And I would argue that in terms of praxis and how we make that specificity and delineation, that ADOS, as far as in praxis, this is going to sound crazy, that we, as far as I can see, are the most aggressively Pan-African group that I've seen in the 21st century. Like, for example, like who have you seen in recent years who just won't let go of what the Clinton administration did to our? I know Yvette Cardell did on her show. She ran Clinton through the dirt, but here we are going here. All the Democrats are going to the southern border crying when you literally had our Haitian brothers and sisters put in cages. We're dying, but because it was under the Clintons at the time, we want to forget that. We constantly talk about some people from West Africa who may have descended from slave traders. I mean, and again, if you go to Breaking Brown, you'll see them have the discussion talking about the descendants of slaves in Nigeria today and how they're living. So if we start to get specific about lineage, like, where are you from? Where are your ancestors from? What were they doing? It creates a lot of problems, I believe, for people that are in the upper classes that may find their way here. So you can't come to this country and run this Pan-African game on me. When I look at your lineage, when I look at your class position, when I look at your struggle and your character, and I see that you come from a class structure within those countries that is specifically anti-Pan-African. You can't come over to me and say Pan-Africanism when you descend from slave traders. Like, forget ADOS for a second. You have people in Nigeria who are living under a caste system, like, based on that history. So people are using Pan-Africanism to hide, but don't want to actually be Pan-African. And I feel like Tone says, the whole LCSC, lineage, class, struggle, character, I feel like that's the way forward, not just for ADOS, but just for the diaspora period. Because when you start to point out these contradictions, the people that are here, which is a very, very small number in comparison to what's going on in the diaspora, how does this minuscule amount skimmed off the top from the so-called best and brightest from these countries, how do you get to speak for poor and working class people around the world? It don't make sense. And I'm so glad that ADOS is here to just kind of lift the veil off of all of that nonsense.
ADOS is
Indeed.
veiled off of a lot of nonsense, bro. Like, it's amazing how much has been revealed behind the presence of the ADOS advocacy, man. It's like we talked about that on a number of occasions. We've talked about it a number of occasions how so many things just came to light and got clarified for us, even just from ADOS and listening to Antonio Moore and Yvette Carnell and how they broke things down. And it's amazing, bro. So I'm just, agreeing with you with what you're saying, how it's really uncovered a lot. And I think it's how they say the harsh reality. I think ADOS has presented the harsh reality to a lot of people that really don't want to, they don't want to see it. Particularly, some of the, the people that Yvette was talking about, the Bush, the Boulay class, you know what I'm saying? And it's kind of messing with what it is that they're looking to do. They talk about the butter biscuits, butter biscuits and all that. So they try to secure the bag for themselves and their family. Her show last night was fire, by the way. Her breakdown, on that whole Boulay group of people and how they really try to take themselves out of the group and basically just look out for themselves is really not. It's never been about group uplift for them, and so we don't need people like that at the front, trying to speak on behalf of us. I think her show was great last night. If y'all didn't see it, y'all should check it out.
Yeah.
Let me
Yeah, go ahead, bro. I just want to make sure. Well, can y'all hear me clearly?
yes,
I had to switch.
Much better.
It's, because I just switched. I had to put StreamYard on the phone. I don't know what's wrong with my audio box, but I guess that's a sign that I need to go on ahead and get the one we've been speaking about for the past 2 weeks. So I'm gonna be on the phone. But go ahead, Brother Logic.
Yeah, I just was saying you sounded fine the entire time I've been listening.
Oh, what? No, I think I probably sounded okay to y'all at some points, but people in the chat were saying that I was still sounding low.
Yeah, so this is what I wanted to say before we close out and get out of here. Going back to the political action that needs to be taken and that must be taken and has to be followed through with. We have to understand that we have become great artists and great singers, and at this point in time, we have become great advocates, right? But until we get those real political warriors out there who really want to do political action, right? We have to understand that we have to step it up, and on every level there's another devil, right? So we have to be prepared to take on these oppositions and these obstacles, and we need that political experience that comes with getting involved. We understand that, like, strategically and numerically right now, trying to get certain things done within the Democratic Party is tactically wise and sound, but to understand what you need to do is all of part of the education. On the last program, we talked about the importance of grassroots politics, which is actually when we're talking about party grassroots, right? The grassroots of the party are the precinct committeemen and its precinct captains, right? So if you want to change, we talked about how the precinct committeemen and the precinct captains change the platform, and they determine the platform, and they control primary candidates and things, and they're delegates for the party, right? And in many ways on how they get things done internal to the party. If we want to make a grassroots change, we have to run on the grassroots level, right? And we want to make platform changes, we have to be in the position to affect those type of changes. So we have to position ourselves where we're best suited to bring about the desired results. That's how you be the power, right? You have to identify the phenomenon and make it act in a desired manner, like old Fred Hampton used to say, right? So understanding now what needs to be done, you got to understand now, well, how do we do it? Once we understand how to get involved, go and be And I say this all the time. Don't just talk politics, be politics, do politics. You just can't have good barbershop conversations and then you don't have no real work. Go be a poll watcher. I'm talking about low level. You can't always start at the top. Everybody wants to start at the most visible position in politics. Go work on somebody's campaign because the value of the experience is unestimable. You cannot, you will only get those type of learned experiences through the doing process, right? You're going to get the education listening to programs like ours, programs like others, but you're only going to get that personal experience through the doing. That's going to make you a better engager in politics, right? You have to be about I don't live where you live. I don't know what it takes to get things going where you live at. You have to be about doing that. Nobody knows how to get your community galvanized and fired up better than you. You have to do that, right? So protect the vote by being a poll watcher, getting in contact with your party officials, right? Even if you're thinking about third-party options, you still need real-world experiences. So get involved in the right now while you're planning and preparing to do whatever you want to do in the future. Get involved now. Don't wait. Get involved now. Learn the process. Learn the players. See how the game is played on an internal level. Getting that experience, then that'll make you a better player. Government is the game, and politics is how it's played. Get in the game, y'all. I'm out.
Peace, bro. Peace. Yeah, brother Josh, go ahead. Then brother Ali, and then we're gonna have brother Reggie close us out. And I'll do the official closeout. I'm gonna read something. Go ahead, brother Josh.
Yeah, just echoing on what my brother Logic was talking about. I was listening to Michelle Obama's piece, a segment of her piece on the Democratic National Convention, and she was talking about our participation in the voting process, and she was saying something about how Hillary Clinton's loss came down to an average of about 2 people per precinct. And that just ties into what the brother was talking about people being a precinct committeeman. Now, I'm not saying this with the same message that she's saying. What I'm saying is how we can show power and become the power, or put ourselves on the path to becoming the power by doing voter registration, by getting active, becoming a precinct committeeman, becoming somebody who's registering a bunch of people to vote. And hey, when these people vote down ballot, when these people see, that's how you get power. So not only is it going to be about us increasing our showing up at the polls, but we're going to show up with increased numbers, and we're going to set that as a new trend. So we're going to trend with, what our platform is doing is we're reaching a lot of people who think politics is something that's just going to continue to ignore them, that think that they're perpetually supposed to be outside of the process, that their voice is never going to be heard and none of this stuff means anything to them or for them. And that's our power, really. Like those people, those are the people who can make it to where we increase our share of the voting populace. We increase our share of people that can inflict some consequences or present an opportunity to those who are willing to give us policy that is for our agenda. And hey, look, I thought we had a powerful discussion tonight. I thought all of the issues we talked about were very, very important. And I just want to say I appreciate you, Brother Reggie, for hopping on our live. And to the family, I wanted to say I am a reparationist. And peace and love.
Peace, brother.
Yeah, I'll just jump in, keep it real short. I just want to thank you guys again for another great discussion. Pull a Russell Simmons on y'all. Thank you. God bless you. Good night. I'm going to pass it off to Brother Reggie.
First, just thank you all for having me on your platform. You guys are doing great work. It just, seconding what, Josh and Brother Logic said, that we have to get involved at the grassroots level, and also understand that, in a lot of these spaces, you might be the only ADOS advocate there. So sometimes you'll have to be that voice, and in some cases, depending on your locality, you may have to be out there by yourself, or and in doing so, you may find that you draw people out, but you still have to step out, not just as an ADOS, but just as a responsible citizen. Find out what's going on. Where are your city councilors going to be? Where are your state senators, your state representatives? Like, is the governor coming through? Find a way to engage these people, because your local vote does matter. It is something that you can give to them, or it's something that you can deny them at the polls, and that matters. And we just have to, like the brother said, that we have to do politics. And with that said, we have to, in our own way, become political scientists. We do a great job, with the data, but it's time to apply that, time to strategize that. And I know it's hard. It's already hard being ADOS in America, but then now we have Great Depression levels, unemployment. We got COVID. The police are still being the police. We're stuck between a rock and a hard place in terms of Biden and Trump. We're losing jobs and homes and employment, but the fight is still the fight. If we don't fight, we're just not gonna win. And third, before I head out, Josh, I'm gonna need to know where you got that T-shirt.
Hey, I was looking at that thing like, oh, that's nice.
I was like, I think I need that. I think I need that. Yeah.
I was like, that's nice.
That's definitely something. But yeah, thank you.
I want to go to this article before we get up out of here. And I got my phone up in front of everything, so it's blocking stuff. So let me see. I just want to read this real quick. And let me see. And I think this segues into what Brother Logic was saying, what Brother Reggie was just repeating, what Brother Josh was just repeating. And let's pull it up, right? Yeah, all of these articles are not going to get it 100% right, and I'm not going to read this whole thing. This is a rather, I don't think it's a lengthy article, but we're at the end of the show and we've been on for a minute. It's not that long at all. So, opinion. This is from MarketWatch.com. To close the racial wealth gap, put more blacks into the seats of power, right? And that message stuck out to me, because it's something that we push on this show and becoming a reparationist. And I meant to pull up, and I probably can't pull it up now because I'm using my phone to stream right now. Dr. Darity and A. Kirsten Mullins, in their book, From Here to Equality. I want to give a shout out to Dr. Darity and A. Kirsten Mullins. They speak about how abolitionism was, and I'm paraphrasing, akin to political suicide back in those days. But they kept pushing and they kept pushing until it became popular. It became popular enough that, well, slavery got abolished, right? So I want to just read a little bit of this. Like I said, we're not going to agree with all of the language and everything, but I agree with the premise. I agree with this title. It says, a startling lack of Black appointees to the highest echelons of U.S. financial regulation has contributed to entrenching institutional racism by ensuring it does not receive sufficient attention. Now, we think about There's so many things we could think about. Kamala's appointments, who her appointments are going to be. If Barack Obama's presidency is any indication of how Joe Biden is going to govern, then they're not going to have a diverse field of people unless he's going to have a brother that personally takes his suit jacket off, like it seemed like Obama had for his first term. So we start to look at this opening line and say, okay, that makes sense, right? That makes all the sense in the world, and it's something that we echo here. It says new research from Georgetown law professor, and I'm gonna put this link in the chat, Chris Brummer, highlights the stark lack of minorities, especially Blacks, in leadership roles at major regulatory agencies like the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Federal Reserve. See, we are going to say ADOS because the possibility that someone from an immigrant background getting into that position doesn't necessarily translate into change or progress for America's descendants of slavery. So, quote, the absence of African-American financial regulators poses enormous challenges from the standpoint of participatory democracy and economic inclusion. These things go together, it's politics and this whole economic sphere. That's why we have a book like From Here to Equality by Dr. Sandy Darity and A. Kirsten Mullins. What's the Stephanie Kelton's book that I haven't started yet, the Deficit Myth. I believe Brother Josh is reading that right now. So continue. The headline figure is just plain shocking. Just 10 of 327 individuals appointed to senior financial regulatory roles since the New Deal of the 1930s was Black. Just 10 of them. Perhaps one of the biggest open secrets in Washington, D.C. is the virtual absence of African-American financial regulators in the United States government, wrote Brummer in the report. And it has a link here, hyperlink. It says, also read this. A mostly white Federal Reserve can't fix our diverse economic problems. I didn't get into that one. Missing at the top. Across the federal government, they are missing and have been missing for generations, with at best short appearances by single political appointees 2 or 3 years at a time, Brummer writes. So this is why when we see Sister Yvette Carnell on her Breaking Brown platform, or Brother Antonio Moore or on his Tone Talks platform, and ADOS in general on their various platforms, highlighting the fact that someone can come from Barbados and be the first Black CEO, and that is somehow a win for us. We see how that masks the fact that we don't have people at these more important positions. And it becomes a pacifier of sorts to put the crying baby back to sleep, right? The pacifier is to simulate the idea that the baby is getting milk. It is getting its substance, and it's not. It's just sucking on something that appears to be a nipple, right? So this is just more pacification when we see, or pacifying, when we see these immigrants from these different backgrounds come to the country and become the first this, or the first Black this and the first Black that, but we don't have these people in these governmental positions. It continues. There are no Black commissioners at the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. Maybe if there was, somebody could have reached out to our man, Jay Morrison, and be like, look, bro, this thing that you're doing is going to crash and fail. I'm just let you know, or rip. There's a bunch of changes that you need to make, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It continues. He points out, or at the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, there has never been a Black chairman of the Fed. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, SEC, or CFTC. And today, the staffs of political appointees on both sides of the aisle remain, with few exceptions, almost devoid of African Americans. And he's giving black political appointees to regulatory agencies, and it's giving you the years. I mean, look at how short this list is, right? 1966, 1974, Andrew Brimmer. I'm not going to read through all of these names. We have a Rodney Hood, who's the National Credit Union Administration, 2005 to 2009, chairman 2018 and current. So it says, why does this matter? America's startling 10-to-1 racial wealth gap is not only due to institutionally racist practices, but also to rules and laws that, when enforced strictly by whites, tend to persist unabated. For instance, government-mandated mortgage lending discrimination, followed by years of more subtle but still crippling racism, have thwarted Blacks' ability to build capital from housing, a key source of wealth accumulation. I can keep going on and on. I'm going to stop it there. But I wanted to close out with that because, you know, we want to always get into the data and the numbers. I want to put that link into the chat so you all can read it for yourselves and we can build on it and grow from it. And, you know, to go back to what the title says, to close the racial wealth gap, put more Blacks in the seats of power. Now, of course, we know that's not going to close the racial wealth gap. Reparations is going to close the racial wealth gap, but I understand the sentiment behind it because maybe we don't have predatory lending if we have an ADOS person sitting in the seat that the article just spoke of. Which seat was that? Y'all know where I'm going. I just read it. So I'm trying to hurry up at the same time. So, you know, we have to become politically involved. We have to get involved in local politics at our state level. We have to get involved with pushing for congressional and House, Senate seats, et cetera, so that we can become the power. That's the purpose of what we're trying to do here as reparationists. We are trying to become the power so that we can have the power to make the necessary changes. And that's why I wanted to bring that link up before we got up out of here. And I want to thank my brothers for Be the Power, of course. I want to thank Brother Reggie from Boston for coming on and sharing some of his wisdom with us and his breakdowns. I want to shout out to the whole ADOS family and shout out to everybody that's listening, whether you are an American descendant or slave of slavery or not. You are vital in helping push forward because this is justice that we are seeking here. This is not a handout. This is justice. So I want to end the show with the motto of the show. Don't just fight the power, become the power. And then and only then will you have the power to make a change. And with that, I say peace.